Chapter 21. When the sixth grade teacher ushered me in, the other kids inspected me, but not unlike I, myself, would study a new arrival. She was a warm, benevolent woman who tried to make this first day as easy as possible. She gave me the morning to get the feel of the room. That afternoon, during a reading lesson, she finally asked me if I cared to try a passage out loud. I had not yet opened my mouth except to smile. When I stood up, everyone turned to watch. Any kid entering a new class wants, first of all, to be liked. This was uppermost in my mind. I smiled wider, then began to read. I made no mistakes. When I finished, a pretty blonde in front of me said, quite innocently, "Gee, I didn't know you could speak English." She was generally amazed. I was stunned. How could this have even been in doubt? It isn't difficult now to explain her reaction, but at age 11, I couldn't believe anyone could think such a thing, say such a thing about me, or regard me in that way. I smiled and sat down, suddenly aware of what being a Japanese ancestry was going to be like. I wouldn't be faced with physical attacks or with overt shows of hatred. Rather, I would be seen as someone foreign or someone other than an American, or perhaps not be seen at all. During the years at camp, I had never really understood why we were there, nor had I questioned it. I knew no one in my family had committed a crime. If I needed explanations at all, I conjured up vague notions about a war between America and Japan. But now I reach an age where certain childhood mysteries beginning to make sense. This girl's guideless remark came as an illumination, an instant knowledge that brought with it the first buds of true shame. From that day on, part of me yearned to be invisible. In a way, nothing would have been nicer than for no one to see me. Although I couldn't have defined it at the time, I felt that if attention were drawn to me, people would see what this girl had first responded to. They wouldn't see me, they would see the slant eyed face, the Asian. This is what accounts in part for the entire evacuation. You cannot deport 110,000 people unless you have stopped seeing individuals. Of course, for such a thing to happen, there has to be a kind of acquisitions on the part of the victims. See, some submerged belief that this treatment is deserved or at least allowed. It's an attitude easy for non whites to acquire in America. I had inherited it. Manzanar had confirmed it. And my feelings at 11 went something like this: you are going to be invisible anyways, so why not completely disappear? But another part of me did not want to disappear. With the same sort of reaction that sent Woody into the army, I instinctively decided I would have to prove that I wasn't different, that it should not be odd to hear me speak English. From that day forward, I lived with a double impulse: the urge to disappear and the desperate desire to be accepted. I soon learned there were certain areas I was automatically allowed to perform in: scholarship, athlete, and school time activities like the yearbook, the newspaper, student government. I tried all of these and made good grades because became news editor, held an office in the girls athletic league. I also learned that outside school another set of rules prevailed. Choosing friends, for instance, often depend upon whether or not I could be invited to their homes, whether their parents would allow this. And what is so frustrating looking back is how I accepted the situation. If refused by someone's parent, I would never say, go to hell, or I'll find other friends, or who wants to come to your house anyways. I would see it as my fault, the result of my failings. I was imposing a burden on them. I would absorb such rejection and keep on looking because for some reason, the Scholarship Society and the Athletic League and the yearbook staff didn't satisfy me, were never quite enough. They were too limited or too easy or too obvious. I wanted to declare myself in some different way, an older and old enough to be marked by the internment, but still too young for the full impact of it to cow me. I wanted in. At one point, I thought like to join the Girl Scouts. A friend of mine belonged, the blonde girl who had commented on my reading. Her name was Radian. Her folks had come from the West, from Amarillo, Texas, and had made a little money in the aircraft plants, but not enough to go yet out of Cambrio House. We found ourselves walking partway home together every day. Her fascination with my ability to speak English had led to many other topics, but she had never mentioned the Girl Scouts to me. Only one day I did. Can I belong? I asked, then added it as an afterthought, as if to ease what I knew her answer was going to be. You know, I'm Japanese. Gee, she said, her friendly face suddenly a mask. I didn't know, but we can find out. Mama's the assistant troop leader. And then the next day, gee, Ginny, no, I'm really sorry. Rage may have been simmering deep within me, but my conscious reaction was, oh, well, that's okay. Radiant, I understand. I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Sure, I'll meet you at the stoplight. I didn't hold this against her any more than I associated her personally with the first remark she made. It was her mother who had drawn the line, and I was used to that. If anything, Rady and I were closer now. She felt obligated to protect me. She would catch someone staring at me as we were walking home from school and would growl, what are you looking at? She's an American citizen. She's got as much right as anyone to walk on the street. Her outburst always amazed me. I would much rather have ignored those looks than challenged them. At the same time, I wondered why my citizenship had to be so loudly affirmed, and I couldn't imagine why affirming it would likely make any difference. If so, why hadn't it kept me out of Manzanar? But I was grateful when Radian stuck up for me. So soon we were together all the time. I was teaching her how to twirl baton, and this started a partnership that lasted the next 3 years. I hadn't forgotten what I learned in camp. My chubby teacher had taught me well. Rady and I would practice in the grassy plots between the buildings, much as I used to in the fire break near Block 28. Behind the back, between the legs, over the shoulder, high in the air, above the two-story rooftops, watching it, timing it fall from the sudden catch. We practiced the splits and bending backwards and high-stepping struts. I saw myself as a sequence princess landing orchestras, leading orchestras across the football field, the idol of cheering fans. There happened to be a Boy Scout drum and a bugle corps located in the housing project next to ours. They performed on local parades, and they were looking for some baton twirlers to march in front of the band. That fall, Rady and I tried out, and we suited them just fine. They made me the lead majorette in the center between Radian and Gloria, another girl from seventh grade. Those two wore blue satin outfits to accent their bright blonde hair. My outfit was white with gold braid across the chest. We wore white high calf boots and boat shaped hats. We worked out trio routines and practiced every weekend with the boys marching up and down the street of the projects. We performed with them at our junior high assemblies, as well as in the big band reviews each spring, with our batons glittering out in front of the brass drums and snares and shining bugles, their banners, merit badges, khaki uniforms, and their squared off military footwork. This was exactly what I wanted. I also gave me the first sure sign of how certain intangible barriers might be crossed. The Girl Scouts was much like a sorority, of the kind I would be excluded from in high school and later on in college. It was run by mothers. The Boy Scouts was like the fraternity ran by fathers. Brady and I were both maturing early. The boys in the band loved having us out there in front of them all the time, bending back, stepping high in our snug satin outfits and short skirts. Their dads, mostly Navy men, loved it too. At that age, I was too young to consciously use my sexuality or to understand how an Asian female can fascinate Caucasian men. And of course, far too young to see that even this is usually just another form of invisibility. It simply happened that the attention I first gained as a majorette went hand in hand with a warm reception from the Boy Scouts and their fathers. And from that point on, I knew intuitively that one reason I had to overcome the war distorted limits of my race would be femininity. When Woody came back from Japan and when Ray came home on leave from the Coast Guard, they would tease me about the short skirts we wore, about how my legs, about about my legs, which were near the other extreme from the heavy thighed Duncan Asia of the ballet dancer at the Manzanar. They called me gobi ashi after the long brown twig like root vegetable gobi. They laughed, but they would show up for the parades whenever they were in town, proud of their neighborhood celebrity. I was a pride that Papa didn't share. When I was striving to be Miss America in 1947, he was wishing I'd be Miss Hiroshima of 1904, and he would counsel me on the female graces, and he understood them, on the need to conceal certain parts of the body, on the guidance of smiling too much. But his taste could not compete with the pull from the world outside our family. For one thing, not much of our family remains. Though larger than the rooms at Manzanar, this apartment was still cramped, forced us kids outside. We ate in shifts. Mama was gone most of that time. And worse of it, I had lost respect for Papa. I never dare show this, but it was true. His scheme for setting up housing cooperatives had failed. With blueprints in hand, he tramped through the Japanese community to hostels, trailer courts, other housing projects like ours, trying to find families who would invest in it. Few had money. Those who did were terrified to let go of it. And the very idea of banking on some kind of matching support from the government seemed laughable after their internment experience. Papa needed an enterprise he could manage from within the family. He decided that a fortune could be made catching shrimp and abalone off the coast of Mexico, then bringing it back to dry and sell in Southern California. Woody was out of the army by this time and looking for work. As a citizen, he could get a commercial license. So at intervals, he would rent a boat, take it down to Esnada or below, load up with abalone, bring the catch home, and all the rest of us would spend days cleaning and cutting up the meat and stringing it out to dry in the bedrooms. For months, the apartment reeked of drying seafood. It was almost a brilliant scheme. In 1947, no one was yet drying Ebola commercially, but there was a small worm that kept attacking the drying meat. Papa could never figure out how to control it. The plan too went to pieces. He, his failures were sharpened in the odd way by Woody's return. He came back from Japan with his mustache thicker and bearing a sword that had been in the family for 300 years, a gift from Aunt Toa. He brought another he brought other trophies, painted scrolls, lacquered trays, things he would have had valued only slightly before the war. All of this delighted Papa, filled him with pride, for his son had returned a larger man, with a surer sense of himself and of where he had come from. Yet while Woody grew, Papa seemed to shrink, losing potency. The roles had been reversed. For the war, he had been the skipper. Now he depended more and more on Woody, who had youth and citizens' mobility, who could license the boat or cross borders easily. Ever more vulnerable, Papa began drinking heavily again, and I would watch it with sorrow and disgust, unable then to imagine what he was going through, too far into my own junior high school survival. I couldn't understand why he was home all day when Mama had to go to work. I was ashamed of him from for that end, and in a deeper way, for being what had led to our imprisonment. That is, for being so unalterably Japanese. I would not bring my friends home for fear of what he would say or do. When he refused to show up for the parades, I marched in. This separated me from him that much more, while the events he did show up for left me miserable with embarrassment. One night, the local PTA held an awards dinner for all the students and the Scholarship Society. I was among them, and this was the sort of achievement Papa encouraged. He and Mama dressed up for dinner. They overdressed. It was the first time they had mixed socially with Caucasians since leaving camp. Papa seldom spoke to Caucasians during those years or at any time afterwards. He did it was a point of honor to appear supremely dignified. He still thought of himself as an aristocrat. He brought himself a brand new single breasted suit of brown worsted in for this occasion, with a matching brown vest and a brown and yellow flowered silk tie. Mama wore a macaroon crepe dress with long sleeves, a necklace of shimmering gold disc, and a black Persian lamb coat I had not seen since before the war. She wore her hair in an upsweep. I knew she felt elegant and glad to be there. She smiled continuously, smiling at everyone as if to make up for Papa's solemn courtesies. When it came time for each student to be presented a certificate, the parents were introduced. Most of them stood up hastily or waved from their chairs, like Radian's dad, a big, ruddy Texan, just as unfamiliar with this scene as Papa was. He blushed, grinned foolishly, and everybody grinned back, loved him. I was standing at the end of the table, shaking the principal's hand when Papa rose, his face ceremoniously grave, and acknowledging the other parents with his most respectful gesture. He pressed his palms together at his chest and gave them a slow, deep Japanese bow from the waist. They received this with a moment of careful, indecisive silence. He was unforgivable, a foreigner, then, a foreigner to them, foreigner to me, foreigner to everyone but Mama, who sat next to him, smiling with pleased modesty. 12 years old at the time, I wanted to scream. I wanted to slide out of the sight under the table and dissolve.